Hello everybody, I am William of IW Studios, and this is going to be a very different video to what you usually see from me. But nonetheless, I hope a lot of you watching this can resonate with what I have to say. Over the past few years, there has been an increasing trend towards the spread of ideas and sentiments that are deeply negative and hostile, and this is particularly present online. The general sentiment that I see on a regular basis is so heavily devoid of positivity, and forces people to fall ever deeper into this cycle of negativity until it eats away at their very drive to live healthily and happily. There were a few reasons why I felt compelled to make this video in the first place. One is because these ideas result in real life people being harmed, both online and real life. Another reason is because I have personally known friends who have fallen victim to these very sentiments. And also because a misleading newspaper headline led me to come very close to the same fate. I want to rewind back to 2015. I was 15 and new to the internet. Prior to this point, I didn't really use the internet all that much because we only had a USB stick that you would connect to the internet, and it worked kind of like data limits on a phone where you're only given an allowance of about 5 gigabytes a month. Because of this, I'd usually only watch YouTube and go on Facebook when it was coming towards the end of the month's allowance. And the rest of the time online I'd spend making additions to a really obscure wiki site about Megablock's pirates. Then in 2015, we got broadband, and this is when I first started using the internet all the time. I'd start uploading videos and watching videos more frequently. I created an Instagram and a Twitter account, and I also stumbled upon the brick filming community. Now, up until this point, I didn't really follow current affairs all that much online. Like the weirdest 15-year-old ever, I'd regularly watch the news, so I knew what was going on, but I wasn't all that interested in having these conversations much with people online. But then came the November 2015 Paris terror attacks. I was literally supposed to be going to Paris the morning after the attacks had happened, so I was actually very close to being there when the attacks took place. So obviously I was heavily interested in following what was going on and what people were saying on the days following the attacks, and then I stumbled upon an article. The article. 1 in 5 Brit Muslims sympathy for jihadists. The article in question received over 3,000 complaints for not accurately representing the poll that led to the headline being made. There was even a lot of scrutiny with the poll itself, and the vagueness of the question was actually asked to people who took part in it. I do highly recommend reading the full article from the Washington Post because it really just highlights how misleading and false the headline actually was. Regardless of all of that, the article did what it was cut out to do. Obviously, as an impressionable 15-year-old, I took the headline at face value. It didn't matter that the headline was deeply misleading. I didn't even have to read a word of the article itself. That headline and its implications were already imprinted in my brain. There was already tension in the air when it came to Islamic extremism in Europe, from the Charlie Hebdo attacks that January, the asylum seekers fleeing the hostility in Syria, and now this. I'm on Twitter following the endless feed of responses on everything going on, and I start reading and following people who were saying the very things I was thinking, feeding into the fear and anger that I felt. There was actually very little I can screenshot of the conversations I had because I deleted my responses a couple years ago, and also because almost all the conversations look like this now. From what I remember, these conversations were basically just fueling these feelings I had brewing up and validating the fear and anger I was feeling. Thanks to these conversations, I felt justified in my fear, believing that a significant percentage of Muslims in the UK were basically jihadists. And as a result of that, the refugee crisis was bringing in a swarm of radical sympathisers in their thousands. It started off with a headline. Then quickly that turns into me interacting with people just as impressionable as I was, alongside people who at this point have turned this into basically their entire online presence. Even though I was interacting with people who felt very similar to me at the time, I could feel how angry obsessing over this stuff was making me, and I took a step back. I don't remember ever interacting with these accounts ever again. I think someone had added me to this Twitter group that was something along the lines of American Patriots or something to that effect, which for obvious reasons felt a bit weird to be included in. I think a combination of that and also the fact that a lot of people involved in this group were obsessing over other issues that I didn't really understand or care about pushed me away from them. But I could totally see a universe where I didn't make some decisions, didn't listen to my gut, kept talking to these people, and well, things could have been a whole lot different. Getting into 2016, I don't really remember thinking about these things as much for a while. The way in which the internet has shaped over the past few years was certainly starting to take shape around this time, but there were still corners of the internet where you could escape it, where you weren't hit on the head 24/7 with sensationalist headlines and videos. So although these things certainly were there, you could make an active effort to avoid it, And you would, mostly, at least compared to now. And I can't help but see a correlation between avoiding certain corners of the internet and being super productive and spending the majority of my spare time making videos. It may not have been something I was even conscious of at the time, but if I were to allow myself to become obsessed with these things that made me mad, it would encourage me to not use that escapism or be motivated to do the things I actually wanted to do, because all my energy would be taken up angrily obsessing over things I don't even understand. I can certainly see someone making the argument that what I'm doing right now kind of is hypocritical, because I am using that very platform I use as escapism to talk about things I wanted to escape from. To that, I'd say that this would certainly seem that way if I dedicated a major portion of my content to exclusively talking about these things, but that is not in my intention, nor is that something I'd want to do. The big takeaway I hope you can take from this is to not allow things that are rooted in negativity take up a significant part of your life, especially if it begins to falter the things in your life that are positive and bring you joy. I made myself focus on things in my life that I considered positive, and it made me a happier person as a result. At the age of 16, I would start to volunteer at a museum, and without saying too much, there certainly was an interesting mix of people working there. There were people there that held very similar sentiments to the people I was speaking to online, and yet, being a public space with visitors from around the world, it was a space away from the internet that exposed me to all kinds of people. And when you're actively interacting with people, when you see people who they are, it becomes a lot harder to put someone into those neat, generalized labels. When you're not actively seeking out media that makes you angry, and you go out and meet people who aren't exactly like you, it starts to become a whole lot more apparent. I do consider myself incredibly lucky that I made that conscious decision to step back from that mindset that I was falling into. But a crucial part of that was my ability to do so in the first place. Things have only gotten more hostile in the years since. It feels as though there are now a few online spaces that are entirely free from all this stuff. And if I were to fast forward just a few years, feeling the same fear and anger that I felt back in 2015, I don't think I would have been as lucky. Algorithms like YouTube and TikTok are infamous for leading people down a rapid rabbit hole where you start watching the more approachable, surface-level, edgy content creators, and you start getting recommended more and more extreme rhetoric by people that they associate with or that have shared audiences. And with that in mind, I think it's actually really hard in today's climate, if you're of that kind of mindset that I was at that time, to actually have a chance to escape from it, because, yeah, you go on YouTube, you go on TikTok, you go on Twitter, and you can't stop seeing all of this negative and deeply dangerous rhetoric. There are now too many highly influential media figures with millions of subscribers that directly benefit from your fear and your anger. Likewise, there are politicians who use that very same rhetoric to convince people to vote for them and distract them from actual issues that affect people. As a result of that, they rally people behind deeply harmful legislations that restrict on people's freedoms and directly result in more suffering and even death. Solely on an individual level, even if the vast majority of people who fall into these sorts of mindsets will most likely stick to online spaces, if just a fraction of people become fueled by the anger from the media that they consume and the people around them, it can lead, and often does lead, to people being attacked on the street for simply fitting the descriptor of a person they've been told to get angry about. At the very least, even if it doesn't lead to physical violence, this kind of mindset teaches you to stop seeing people as individuals, but instead a physical embodiment of the other, someone belonging to an outgroup which you can collectively and neatly label as a problem. The only ones who seek to benefit from any of this are the select few people who gain power and wealth directly from it. They will do nothing to make your life better, only lead you down further into a spiral of depression, distrust, and anger, until you are unable to escape the negative and hostile thoughts that they tell you to believe. If you relate at all to anything that I've said, or feel as though you have been exposed to content that made you feel similarly to how I did back in 2015, I'd heavily encourage you to take a step back and be more cautious of the things that people are trying to tell you. Don't let negative ideas eat at you and prevent you from doing the things you enjoy doing. This can look like many things, like restricting the amount of time you go on the internet, going outside and volunteering somewhere, meeting real-life people who aren't exactly like you, and in general, spending time on the aspects of your life that are genuinely positive. If you do all of this, you might start to no longer resonate with the things certain media figures or news headlines have been telling you. And if you still choose to actively seek out certain content, I want you to not take anything people tell you at face value. No one is exempt from this, no matter what they believe. Your own mental health and well-being should come before your engagement to whatever online or real-world external discourse that you expose yourself to. And none of this is to say that you are never justified to be angered by the things you see and hear. However, it takes putting your own personal priorities first and being critical of the things that you are told to know where that anger and frustration should be pointed at. Thank you for reaching the end of this video. For anyone who regularly follows me, I know this is very far removed from anything you'd usually see from the channel, and for anyone new, this is not my usual content. I am not making a big directional shift to my channel, and you can expect to see more of what you usually expect from me coming up. This has been something that's been on my mind for a long time, and it is really nice to finally get it out there. But now that I've finished with all that, thanks for watching. Keep doing the things that you love to do, keep creative, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.